Last week that we will be talking about living in the presence of God, living in God's presence. We have to understand that one of the main things that had to happen in our history for us to be able to say God is with us, not just some days, but every day, is the resurrection of Jesus Christ, right? Without the resurrection of Jesus Christ, we couldn't claim God is with us all the time. But because He is risen, we have access to that presence of God. God can be with us at all times. And I love the story of Luke in chapter 24 because in other Gospels, after the resurrection, Jesus encounters different people, the disciples, right? And enters and barges into their meeting, right? But Luke kind of has a different way of narrating that story. After Jesus rises from the dead, one of the first encounters that he has is with two disciples that are on a journey to Emmaus or Emmaus. I'm going to say Emmaus because that's how you say it in Spanish. You understand which city I'm talking about, right? And the story is very interesting because of how realistic it is. I want you to imagine with me two worlds. Not that they're different, right? But two worlds for the sake of understanding what just happened as Jesus comes back to life, right? So you got in the invisible world, the world that we can't see with our eyes, Jesus has just conquered death, right? Jesus has given us the power to say sin has no longer a foothold in my life. Jesus has defeated Satan and all his plans. There is salvation now in the name of Jesus and no more condemnation. There is now a way to the Father that is not difficult. The heavens rejoice and celebrate. Hope is alive, and no one can take that hope away from us, right? The angels are celebrating and singing. All this stuff is happening, but you can't really see it. And then this other world, we call it the visible world. You have two men just walking after the resurrection. Jesus is already risen. And yet these two men are walking, and they're not just walking, la, 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 right? They are walking with sadness. Their shoulders are drooped, their faces are confused and downcast. This is the day of resurrection. And this is the story in Luke chapter 24, verse 13 through 24. It says, on that same day, meaning the same day that Jesus came back to life, two disciples were traveling to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. They were talking to each other about everything that had happened. While they were discussing these things, Jesus himself arrived and joined them on their journey. They were prevented from recognizing him. He said to them, "What are you talking about as you walk along?" They stopped, their faces downcast. The one named Cleopas replied, "Are you the only visitor to Jerusalem who is unaware of the things that have taken place there over the last few days?" He said to them, "What things?" They said to him, "The things about Jesus of Nazareth. Because of his powerful deeds and words, he was recognized by God and all the people as a prophet. But our chief priests and our leaders handed him over to be sentenced to death, and they crucified him. We had hoped he was the one who would redeem Israel." All these things happened 3 days ago, but there's more. Some women from our group have left us stunned. They went to the tomb early this morning and didn't find his body. They came to us saying that they had even seen a vision of angels who told them he is alive. Some of those who were with us went to the tomb and found things just as the woman said. They didn't see him. So Jesus is alive. The women that went there haven't even seen Jesus alive. And the first people that Jesus decides to visit, right, face to face, are two disciples just simply walking. And what strikes this image the most and that paints it so real is that they say, "We had hoped that he was the one who would redeem Israel." So imagine, they're just walking and they're saying, "Oh man, I mean, We had so much hope for this Jesus. And they're just walking, right? And they tell him this. And this was the mindset of pretty much everyone in town, all of his followers. They wouldn't expect the Redeemer walking alongside of them when things around them still look the same, right? For them, the Romans are still governing, right? For them, there's still clearly a lot of poor people that haven't been saved and redeemed and helped, right? They're still oppressed. Nothing seems to have changed socially, right? There's still no freedom of religion that they wish to have. There's still division between the Jews and Samaritans and the Gentiles. So for them, nothing has changed. It's all the same. And they're just walking. We had hoped that he was the one who would redeem Israel. These words kind of help you understand the next declaration, right? The next phrase that it says, they were prevented from recognizing him. They were prevented from recognizing him. And that's very interesting because it never says God prevented them from recognizing them, right? In the Greek, it's actually more about a reflexive verb, right? Where you do this to yourself, right? So it's kind of like I kind of did this to myself where I wasn't able to recognize this Jesus that just came alongside, the resurrected Jesus that came alongside. As if their expectations of this risen Messiah and Redeemer was so big, was so different, that when he actually appeared before me, I couldn't even see it. I couldn't even notice it. It was so far off that I wouldn't even tell. And we can't judge them, you see, because we've been in those shoes as well. How many times have we asked God, I need you to show up in my life right now? Like every day. Okay, sure. Every day we need that, right? Like every day. But you know, there are those moments when it's like, God, I need to show up right now. And the thing is that we already have in our minds an idea, a preconceived idea, right, of how God needs to show up. Like, I need to show up in this, and this, and that way. Like, if you don't show up in these ways, I'm not going to acknowledge that you showed up, right? But when he actually does show up in a very different way, in his own way, do we miss it? Absolutely, right? And it's after the fact that we look back and we say, oh, God was there all the time. God did show up. God didn't fail me. God did come through. It was my expectation kind of blinded me to actually see the presence of God when he showed up in his own personal way. It's very common for us to do that with people too, right? If I tell you a superhero is going to come walking through that door, what's your favorite superhero, Titus? Where's Titus? What's your favorite superhero? Which one? He doesn't have one? Good for you. All right. You have to say Jesus is your superhero. But if I tell you, right, if you like Marvel or DC comics, right? If a superhero comes and I tell you there's going to be a superhero that comes through that door, you already know what to expect from that superhero, correct? Right? We hope to see someone in capes, right? Or maybe someone muscular, right? Or maybe someone strong, right? But if none of those descriptors fit, right, and that person just walked into this setting, you would miss that person, right? What expectations do we actually have when it comes to the presence of God? Have you ever thought of that? Because often our expectations tend to blind us from when the presence of God actually does show up and we say, oh, is this you? Is this you? We often come to Jesus with such expectations. And it's often that we do this in our times of anguish, in our times of confusion, in our times of need, in our times of distress. And we're so fixed on how this problem should be resolved as opposed to how can you be present? How can you be present? It's two different things, right? Because God is not always going to be present to fix your problem. God is going to be present to be present. How many times do we need that friend to just come alongside and say, I just need you to be present, not tell me how to fix my problems? True? Right? So God often wants to do the exact same thing. It's like, I just want you to know that you're not alone. that I'm here with you. But we often want God's presence to be like a bonus thing where you come be present, but you also fix all my problems, dear God, okay? Right? But God says, no, I know what you need. You need presence. You need friendship. And I'm here to give that to you. And we're often so fixated on that when Jesus does come through in his own gracious way, and I have to explain this to you because gracious meaning that we don't deserve this, right? We have no right to claim this. Sometimes our entitled mind, my entitled mind, right, often thinks, God, you have to come through and save me because I am your child, right? God has no obligation at all. He doesn't owe us anything. He doesn't owe you grace. He doesn't owe you mercy. He doesn't owe you anything. So when he does come through, when he actually decides to do something for you, it's grace and it's love and it's abundant. And so we receive it with so much gratitude in our lives. And yet sometimes it's so easy to miss it. So easy to miss it. But Luke doesn't want you to miss it. And he was very meaningful. And I love this story because he doesn't just tell the story of like, oh yeah, this is how you recognize God's presence. He reveals it in a very different way when he talks about God with us. So the story continues in Luke chapter 24, 28 through 35. It says, when they came to Emmaus, he acted as if he was going on ahead, right? So you can imagine, they're walking and then they kind of turn to where they have to go into the city, but Jesus is kind of like walking ahead. But they urge him, saying, hey, wait, stay with us. It's nearly evening and the day is almost over. So he went in to stay with them. After he took his seat at the table with them, he took the bread, blessed and broke it, and gave it to them. Their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, but he disappeared from their sight. They said to each other, weren't our hearts on fire when he spoke to us along the road and when he explained the scriptures for us? They got up right then and returned to Jerusalem. They found the 11 and their companions gathered together. They were saying to each other, the Lord really is risen. He appeared to Simon. Then the two disciples described what had happened along the road and how Jesus was made known to them as he broke the bread. How was Jesus' presence made real in their lives? What did Jesus have to do? Break bread. Simple act of fellowship, right? Of hospitality. Luke wanted to portray Jesus as someone you would recognize through something that Jesus did often. Impactful in every time he did it, but often scandalous when he did it, right? How many times did he break bread with sinners? How many times did he break bread with people that he wasn't supposed to hang out with? He broke bread with Matthew, right, the tax collector. He broke bread with Samaritans. He broke bread with women. He broke bread with women who were living in sin, right, and he still welcomed them at the table. He even broke bread with Judas, right? Judas wasn't cast out because, I know what you're all up to, right? No, you're still welcome on the table. I'm still going to break bread with you because I'm here to be present with you. And not just once, but I'm sure many times he broke bread with Judas. Jesus began and sustained his ministry through this act of hospitality, an act of presence in its core, an irresistible invitation to be seen, to be accepted, to be worthy of sitting at the table with Jesus. Jesus came so that we will know him through a simple act of presence. And we sure can't miss it. I don't want you to miss it. The resurrection took place so that whatever journey we are on, you will recognize Jesus, not because of some flash in the sky or some angel in your dreams, but by the simple act of presence, of breaking bread with you, of spending time with you, and saying, my son, I may not solve every problem in your life, but I'm here with you. You're not alone, and we'll get through this together. The presence of God. And it could be a presence where it calms you, a presence that brings awe, a presence that brings wonder, a presence that transforms you, a presence that encourages you, right? God's presence is so good. It's so good that it makes you worship Him. When you encounter the presence of God, you will worship God. You will worship God. Here's what happens, right? You can be fleeing from your enemy. And the moment that you see God's presence and God's presence meets you, what are you going to do? You're going to worship. You can be at the most bottom moment of your life and you decide to turn to God and say, God, I need you. And He shows up. What do? You worship. You could be at the highest moment of your life, right? Where you're just happy and you just want to give gratitude to someone. And you encounter the presence of God. And what do? You worship. It's a natural reaction for us when we encounter the presence of God to do something. And that something is we worship. King David portrayed that very well. And he shows it in almost every psalm where he encounters the presence of God. Here's one, and with this one we're going to close. In Psalm 63, verse 1 through 8. This is what he declares. The presence of God in his life is so powerful that whatever moment he is in, it turns into a time of worship. This is the moment where he is running away for his life because someone is after his life, and he's alone, hiding. No friend with him, right? And yet he encounters the presence of God, and the natural reaction in his heart is to just say, God, you're so good. I'll read the psalm, and it says, God, my God, it's you I search for you. My whole being thirsts for you. My body desires you in a dry and tired land. No water anywhere. Yes, I've seen you in the sanctuary. I've seen your power and glory. My lips praise you because your faithful love is better than life itself. So I will bless you as long as I am alive. I will lift up my hands in your name. I am fully satisfied as with a rich dinner. My mouth speaks praise with joy on my lips. Whenever I ponder you on my bed, whenever I meditate on you in the middle of the night, because you've been a help to me, and I shout for joy in the protection of your wings. My whole being clings to you. Your strong hand upholds me. That's the presence of God. And I want us to be a people who don't miss a single day of that presence of God in our lives. It's not there to fix everything in your life. It's just there to tell you, I'm here with you. We'll get through this. Let me give you hope. Let me give you strength. Let me give you courage. Let me give you resilience, right? Let me give you faith. But more than anything, let me tell you how much I love you, because there's no other place I'd rather be but right here next to you, to sit with you and to walk with you. Amen? One of the ways that we are reminded of this presence of God that Jesus left for us, it's communion, right? Jesus said, this is a reminder of what I did for you, of what it meant for God to be with us, God with us. And every time we partake of this communion, this sacrament, we are reminded of the presence of God in our lives daily. And we long for that constant and eternal presence in His house, in the house of the Lord. So I'm going to invite you all, I'm going to invite our pastors to come forward, please.